Well, hello and welcome to the Alpha Anywhere demo and Q&A webcast. I'm Dave McCormick, VP of Products and Services here at Alpha Software, and I am pleased to present Dion McCormick, no relation, great last name, who is our lead solutions engineer, who will be doing a demo at the beginning of today's presentation. Also joining us today, Sarah Mitchell, who's in charge of our documentation department. So we've got at least two smart people here to answer your questions and to teach you some stuff about Alpha Anywhere. So let's get started. Hello, Dion, are you there?
Yes, I am. How am I coming through?
You're coming through great. So let me go ahead and make you the presenter.
The
see how that goes.
Moment of truth.
The moment of truth. For those of you who joined us last week, it was much. We had a few problems, but
it was a disaster.
But this just okay. Now let's not. Yeah. It was somewhat of a disaster. However,
I'm not sugarcoating it.
Today, mark my words, nothing can possibly go wrong. So I'm sure we've got that going for us. So take it away, Dan.
It's like the old adage, I plan on living forever. So far, so good.
So far, so good, yeah.
So good. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Really appreciate it. Apologize about the troubles last week. We got it all fixed and understood. Something very strange, who knows, but kind of the way it goes. Today, I'm going to kind of follow up on, well, we went ahead and recorded the demonstration, sent it out. So if you haven't seen, I'm going to do a quick recap, but we're talking about the new PDF viewer. So we're going to dive into that in a few minutes. In the meantime, as Dave said, go to your GoToWebinar control panel and put any questions you might have there. Also, remember, you can send them to guides@alphasoftware.com, GUIDES, and we look at those and those kind of, in fact, this series or this discussion came out of a question that came through there. So we appreciate it. We do have some others that people have sent. We're working on those. We'll get those up and running as soon as possible. We want to make sure you are up to date on what we're doing. And also, more importantly, we want to know if you send information in there, we take it seriously and we try to help you as much as possible in terms of your requests. So with that, put your questions in. I do have a couple quick new things that are really cool, which we're going to cover soon. So let me just jump over here and go into here. Let's go to I wanted to go to the new pre-release notes. I wanted to share with everybody. We are not going to cover this today, but I'm extremely excited about it. It's very cool. So I'm going to scoot down here, and it's a new feature. It's in build 7382, and it's called Live Test. Lightning bolt. It's so cool. It has its own lightning bolt there. And we're going to cover this a little bit more, but the cool thing about this is before we've had working preview and live preview, and now we have live test. And this allows you to actually test your full application inside the development environment, which is really cool. Instead of, live preview and live preview and working preview allowed you to test either the A5W page you were working, the grid, the UX, that subset, but now you have this live test capability. It really makes things really cool. It's kind of, getting back to make a change, see how it affects your whole application. And sometimes you need to be able to testing multiple pieces there. So we're going to come back and do a demonstration of that. I wanted to make sure we prepared properly and had everything ready to go on there. But I wanted to show you that it is available. And if you feel comfortable, you can use the universal installer to install that in our nightly build.
Is it just me or is Dion's audio cut out? Dion, are you there?
Sounds like his audio cut out.
Oh boy. Hello, Dion. Yeah, it's not like I jinxed it or anything. Come on, you can't blame me. Hello, Dion, are you there? Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Oops.
There we go.
When did I lose you?
You lost me 1 minute ago. Okay. Which was about 4 minutes after I said nothing can possibly go wrong.
I know, exactly. Well, totally I was just mentioning they use the universal installer, but do be careful that you don't edit a production. So what I'm doing now is I'll have like a folder with my production workspaces, and then I'll have a folder that has my kind of nightly test ones there, and just you take a little more organization. But again, the universal installer is really handy from that standpoint to help you manage those different installs on the same system. And again, if you're really paranoid, set up a different virtual machine and use that, to kind of test out nightly stuff and do things so you don't disrupt anything from there. So with that said, and if
So
I'm
quick,
still
I know you said you were going to do a live test later, but just as a quick aside, do you know quickly the difference between live test and say using the local host's A5 web root? Or is it that it's all built into the
it's
development
built into the IDE. Yeah, you can still
Okay.
use that method of publish, but this
Yeah.
just automates when you click the button, it publishes it and runs it right inside the development environment. So you don't actually have to go outside the development environment.
Yeah, okay, it's all one
Really
click then.
handy.
Yeah, great.
Yeah, and it's really handy, especially it's been driven by new users who are using the consumer edition, and it just makes one less step you have to go through. And I want to live test my whole application. Boom, you're good to go, and off to the races goes from there. So today I'm going to follow up, and again, if you've seen the demo that I put together and we mailed out, then I'm going to go through that fairly quickly, but recovering what the ability for Alpha Anywhere to handle PDFs. Now, Alpha has had a strong PDF capability for many, many years. First and foremost, you could create PDFs using a built-in or a print driver. Now, by the way, and that's not this demo, but we're now moving to an internal method for creating PDFs that doesn't require a print driver. It really makes things faster, simpler, and more reliable. So that is available, and we're doing a lot of testing and validation on that. Just makes the environment one less thing to worry about kind of from standpoint. But you've also have the ability to view PDFs through opening them in panel cards or iframes, things like that. You've also had the ability to generate PDFs from absolute layouts. You've also been able to generate PDFs from reports through XBasic. So we've always had those kind of capabilities, but this is a new capability, which is our new PDF viewer. So it's new and improved. It actually is a control, and you'll see that you can input into a UX and it will display a PDF. So instead of having to either put it in an iframe or launch it into a separate tab in your browser, you can actually incorporate PDFs right into the visual interface. And it's very simplistic, and you'll see in a few moments how to do that. It does simplify that process of opening up. It's more reliable. Also really nice is that it has built-in controls and everything else. So it just is a nice, more refined. And we're seeing a lot of people use it because they save reports as PDFs and then they want to show them. They have legal documents that have been saved as PDFs or contracts or things like that, and those are all available there. And it's very flexible in terms of not only can you do static PDF viewing, but you can do dynamic stuff, which I'll show today. So we're going to go over the PDF viewer, and we're going to show not only the static, but also the programmable, the JavaScript load command from there. And as I go through this, please, if you have any questions, put them into the Q&A section, and we'll be monitoring those and get to those. And if you have no interest in PDF viewers, but you have questions, go ahead and do that also from that standpoint. So I'm going to jump over into my development environment. And I've got two UXs, and I can provide these for folks after this. So if you want a copy, let us know, and I'll make sure we get a copy of that. So the first one is our PDF static viewer. So I'm going to go down here. By the way, you can use the new add control and type PDF, and it will find the PDF viewer. That's the simplest way to do it. For folks who don't have that yet, they're kind of on older, you can go into, I think it's other controls. And in there is the new PDF viewer in other controls. So there's two ways to find it from there. So you add that to your UX, and it's a very simple controller. You basically have an ID. You can give it a width and a height, so you can kind of structure it for how best works into your application from there from a visual standpoint. And then last but not least, you can put in a PDF name that will be displayed when this PDF is, or when the PDF viewer is shown. There's some other class things you can do to kind of alter the container in which the viewer is held into. But as you can see, it's not much to it in terms of properties, because all it does is display a PDF. So now very important is I'm going to go back to my web projects control panel and go to my all files in my project. So in my project right here, I have some sample PDFs that I'm going to be using for this demonstration here. They just grabbed them off the internet, just put them into my folder here. So you'll notice in my static viewer, I don't have like a URL. I just basically have that it's in the same location of the project. So if I were to publish this to my server, I'd have to make sure that I include all the elements so that when it's up on the server, that that PDF file is there. So, and there's different ways to load this. We can talk about that in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and do a working preview. And you'll see in a moment, it does two things. First is it renders this new PDF viewer. You can see it has all these controls right here. And then secondly, it rendered that PDF I had specified into it. As you can see, this is my rendering it. Now notice I don't have to scroll the whole page. It's all in here. I can zoom it in and out. I've got zoom levels here. I can say fit it to the page width, automatic zoom. If I've got multiple pages, I can go to those pages. This is a single page here. I can actually search inside here, and let's go Valve, and let's go ahead and highlight all, and you can see it's hollow. So all these neat new capabilities are just in there. You don't have to build them. You don't have to worry about them. They're in there, including printing, opening the file, bookmarking it, downloading it, and making it larger so you can see a complete kind of experience there. And I don't know how to get out of that, so we'll go here. So it's really nice, and it's very nice, little effective, cool. And you can see the dimensions of this is what I've specified, but obviously you can specify different dimensions based on what you want to do, and you'll see that in a moment. Now we also support bookmarking, so if your PDF has bookmarking, you can open that up and see, you know, the different ways of seeing the data in there. This one doesn't have bookmarking. I think I have an example which has it there. So all those nice features, and again, it happens within the realm of your user interface. So you'll see in a moment, you can have other alpha components around it, so it becomes a part of that. And it's not this weird separate thing. You don't have to do a lot of weird, you know, JavaScript or HTML to get it to work, or to embed it, or to make it look right, etc. And it handles that very, very nicely from there. So again, it's a very straightforward component. You basically add it to your UX. You then specify your width and height, then a default PDF that you would like to show in that UX. And again, this can be embedded anywhere in your user interface. Really nice, handy, simple, but very powerful. And I think it's really going to make a lot of improvements to existing systems, but more importantly, to newer systems that can say, hey, you know, I can now use PDFs more efficiently within my architecture from that standpoint. Now, you'll notice in this case, it is a static. So I put in a static value. But now what I'm going to do is show you how I can make that dynamic, meaning that I don't have to just have, like, if I have 3 PDFs, I don't have to create 3 different PDF viewers. I can have a single PDF viewer and then show different PDFs within that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that next. So I've got another demo here. It's called the PDF Viewer Dynamic. And you'll see that I have a panel layout, which has 2 panel cards. They're side by side. So a very straightforward kind of structure. On the left-hand side, you're going to see we have a list control, and that list control has a list or contains data, which is my PDF. Now you'll see in a moment I've created a static set, but that could have easily been a list that pulled data from a database that had maybe a series of documents that are in a document table that have PDF values associated with them. That would be the PDF file name. Or it could be an API call that calls an API and brings back that information. Now on the right side, on my other panel card, I have my PDF viewer. And I've gone ahead and structured it, put it in there, much like you saw before, but I left it empty. So let's go ahead and demonstrate this. So I'm going to go ahead and do work in preview. And you'll see on the left-hand side, I have my list of PDF files in my list. On the right-hand side, there's a missing PDF file. So most likely, I would probably, that's one thing I'd like it to be able, you know, it's telling me, hey, I don't know what PDF to display. So I'm talking to the team about maybe, you know, setting a stage saying keep it empty, so you just see this blank kind of environment there. You, of course, could put a dummy PDF there so it says, you know, like instructions or something like that, but that's how it goes from there. But now when I click on an item on the left-hand side, I want to see it rendered in my PDF viewer. So let's go ahead and do our backflow first. So as you can see, boom, when I clicked on the backflow, it loaded that PDF into mine, and then I have all of the features and capabilities of the PDF viewer available within that. Now I'm going to click sample. You'll see it basically reloaded that PDF file in here, and now I have that sample. As you can see, we have multiple pages, so I can use my pagination functionality, and I can go up and down, see how that goes. I can actual size it. I can say, let's say page fit. So you can see how it looks, does all that rendering for you. I can search in there, etc. Then I have my bookmark one. So I'll put my bookmark sample. You can see this one's a little old. Look at that, check that out. This old school interface. But now if I go over here, you can see I have my different pages. And I don't know what these things are, but you know, I can go to the different pages here so I can quickly navigate my pages from there, plus be doing everything else from there. Or if I don't want to show that, I can go from there. But as you can see, it's lightning fast. It kind of just basically, boom, as I select one, it's going to load that PDF in there, and then it's usable from there. And so let me show you how I constructed this. So the idea is I want to have a set of PDF file names here, then my UX. So let's go in here, go into my PDF viewer. So you can see I just added that PDF viewer like I did before, set a height and width, and I can change that at will. But in my case, I left the PDF name empty. And again, you could, if you want, create a like a white sheet PDF. That would be the way to do it, is create a single page of white sheet and put it over there. I'm talking about maybe there's a way to say, you know, when there's no PDF, don't put a warning on there kind of scenario. But that's all there. Now on the left-hand side, we had our list control, and this is just a standard Alpha Anywhere list. I'll go ahead and open it up. In here, for data, I'm using static data. Now, and you can see it's very simple. I just have a column called PDF, and then I have the names of my files in there. Now I'm using static just for demonstration here, and when I send it out, it'll be easier for you to use, but you could use this with SQL database. So I could call a database table. You could use a data series. You could use custom. You could use an Excel file, a CSV file. So as you can see, it really, however you want to populate those set of PDFs, you can do it whatever method is most efficient for your application there. So in there, I have a single feed or field PDF. And then in my list layout, all I have is my PDF as a list. So all I'm doing is putting those fields. And so when this runs, it takes that static data and renders it here and there. Now, the second part is, well, hey, when I click on this, I want to update this over here. Now, in this case, there's no action JavaScript to do that at this point, but there's a very simple single line JavaScript you can use for that. So first, let me go back into my list. I want to make sure you understand that in my list, I can say return value type and return field. Now, what that is basically if you reference the list as a control in either XBasic or in JavaScript, this is how you tell it how to return that information. What is the selected record is basically what we're talking about. So in my case, I'm saying, oh, if anybody asks for what the value of list underscore PDF is, it is the PDF field, and it's the one that's currently selected in there. So each time I click on that list, it behind the scenes says, oh, you've clicked on the second row, that's bookmark.pdf or whatever, and that's my current value. So if I ask for that value, I'm going to get that information. Now, in my case,
for one sec.
Sure,
yeah.
please.
Okay, so you've been showing examples of PDFs, which are files that are on your hard drive or get published with your application, that kind of thing. The question is, could you show a PDF that is a website instead? In other words, could that return field have a URL in it, or do you have to do something different?
I believe so. I haven't experimented, but let's go ahead and PDF. Let's go ahead and try this real quick.
And we can do this afterwards. I don't mean to break.
Yeah, no problem. I only take a moment here, but I agree. I think you can, but I want to double check. Okay, so I'm going to grab that URL. I'm going to go here, go back to my static real quick, and I'm going to go ahead and edit that to be that URL. So let's see, and we'll know our question answer in a moment. Yep, there you go.
It's smart enough to know the difference between a file and a URL. Great. Well, that
exactly.
answers
so in my case,
question.
It's a very good question. So in my case, this static data is a file name, but I could easily go here. Now that won't just, you probably want name and then the PDF actual file name, but I can go ahead and go in there. Let's go ahead and do a working preview. So first I'm going to do that, then I'm going to do that. Interesting. I'll have to find out why that didn't work. So so I'll check. That's a really good question. We do know that if you put in the PDF name, but I'm not sure, all I'm doing is saying set this to here. So I'll have to find out why that did.
Okay.
So we'll find that out before that. Good question. We do appreciate that. It's good information for everybody. Because often you're not going to want to, maybe you do have them hosted on a public server or some like a government server or something like that. You don't want to actually have to copy all that into your thing, into your project. Plus you can also probably set up relative URLs and things like that if you want to move them around from there.
That'd be cool.
So as
Well,
I
I still
mentioned,
have you here. We've got just one more question there, and that is,
sure, no,
does this
please.
work on mobile as well, or is this just web only?
Yeah, this will work on mobile. Yeah.
Great, wonderful.
It's fully there.
Thanks.
Okay. The question would be there is if you're on mobile, yeah, it's going to call the server and the server is going to have the PDF there or the URL. And I'll find out why this demo didn't work in terms of, I wonder, it just didn't like that address of this when it put that in there, which isn't, oh, there you go. There's the problem right there. Check out what it says.
It's PDF.pdf.
Oh, that is. Okay, I wonder if that confused it or something like that. We'll figure that out later.
Okay.
Okay, so again, when I click on a row, it's going to set the field in the PDF. Now I have a action JavaScript here. So if I go add new action and just to let people see it, if I go here and type PDF, you see I don't have a pre-built action JavaScript to load a PDF. I'm sure that's coming down the road now. But I have already created, and let's go ahead and delete that since we don't need it. I've already created a action JavaScript called PDF display. So again, anytime I do stuff, I really like to create action JavaScripts because then it can be reused with buttons and other things like that. I kind of centralize where everything, instead of embedding it somewhere, I try to put it in action JavaScript so it can be reusable. So in here, I'm doing two commands. The first command is I'm saying, hey, you know what? Let me scoot this over a little bit here. Give me the current value of list PDF. So as I mentioned a few minutes ago, in this case, what it's going to do is it's going to say, oh, they selected row 2. Row 2 is bookmark.pdf. So the list underscore PDF's current value is now bookmark.pdf. This command basically says, give me that value and put it into a variable. Now that it's in a variable, I'm going to run this. This is the magic. It's a command called PDF viewer load, and then the name of the PDF. And that may be where the HTTP stuff's screwing up right here. Maybe it's in this that I've got the problem. So I'll check it out from there. But what this tells me is that now what's going to happen is when this occurs, then the system takes that PDF viewer, loads in that PDF, and then renders it for the person. And this is it, just two things here. And so that is how I'm loading it. But how do I trigger this? So basically I have an action JavaScript here called PDF display, but I need to trigger that. I need to tell it. And when I want it to be triggered is after someone has clicked on a row in the list. So let me go ahead and show you. I'm going to go ahead and click here to see the JavaScript code. So this is how you run that anywhere, but I'll show a simpler way to do it. So now we have our generic command called PDF underscore display that grabs the value of list PDF and then tells this viewer to update it with that information. So now I'm going to go to the last step, which is telling the list when someone clicks on a row, go ahead and trigger that activity. So I'll go in here and I'm going to go here to, you can go one of two places. You can go to list properties and scroll down to the JavaScript runtime, or easier, you can just go down here to list events. This is faster. Pull it up. And here are all the events that can happen. So there's this whole set of events that are available on the list that allow you to put your own little code in there to make something happen. Now, the most important ones are on click, which runs, and it gives you a little description here. It runs when you click on a row, but also one that I'd like to highlight is called on change, when a row changes, and on select. That's actually a really important one because I want to explain what that is. Let's go, where's on select? Or let's go select, on select here. Now, the difference between on click and on select is the following. On click happens when someone literally clicks on a row. So there's a physical action, or someone taps on a row. So I only want it to update when someone there. Now, on select means no matter when a row is selected, whether the user does it or behind the scenes, I want you to act on that. And that's important because sometimes in your list, you'll say automatically select the first row, meaning that you can't have a null selection. Something always needs to be selected. And if that's true, what will happen is a row will be selected by the system, and then this will trigger. But if the system selects it, the on-click event won't be triggered. So you have to kind of decide how you want your application to run. On-click is usually waiting for the person to do something from there. But when that happens, I run that action I've created. So I just went up here and said, insert code to run it, click there, click OK, and it inserted this little piece of code. So that means when someone clicks on this list, two things are going to happen. First, behind the scenes, the list is going to set the value of the list to that row that was selected, specifically the PDF name there. Then the second thing it's going to do is say, oh, I've got an on-click event. So I'm going to trigger this thing, whatever it is, go do it. And in my case, what I then do is read that new selected value and then update the PDF viewer to do it from there. And so it's 1, 2. And that's how we achieve the ability to basically load up any number of of items in this list. And whenever the person clicks on something, it displays it in the PDF viewer, and it's now genericized. So I could reconnect literally this list to a database or to some other source, and all of these things would continue working so long as I map what that key PDF name is to the value that's returned by the list. So for instance, right now it's a field. If like in my database, I change this to database and this is like PDF file name, I have to make sure just to adjust this so it's returning that file name as it comes there, or from an X basic function, or however it does from there. So that is the PDF viewer. As you can see, it's very powerful. I'll find out why that HTTP didn't show up. We know it will, but I'm not sure. It might be my JavaScript, something about it. Maybe it doesn't like the // because you'll notice in here, I may have to make a JavaScript say if it's got a PDF kind of, it's got these slashes in there. That could be confusing it. So I'll figure it out from there and find out what's going on with that. But other than that, I really like the control. It makes your user interfaces look much nicer. Very simple to implement, but very flexible. And I think you'll see other features kind of be built around this, because PDFs are so used everywhere. I mean, for storing, archiving of documents. I mean, everybody deals with PDFs. In fact, what's funny, Dave, I don't know if you've seen that. It's like a ad for insurance, and it's the guy like, don't be your parents kind of thing. And last part, the funniest part is last part, he goes, okay, like they lead up to it and then they go, okay, all these people are around a computer, and he goes, okay, who wants to open up a PDF file? And then everybody like blanches and starts to walk away from the computer. Funniest ad I've ever seen. It's brilliant, absolutely brilliant. They're all like, and one guy's just like shaking his head like, nope, not gonna do it.
Can't do it. Yeah, exactly. Not gonna explain that either. Yeah, funny.
Good.
So that was terrific there, Dan.
Thank you.
We've covered a lot of the questions about this as we went, but one of the questions we had is, can we get that PDF viewer to, like, if you're doing a panel, can you get it to fill a panel like you can, like with the list?
Oh, you know what? I don't see that. I don't see the width and height. I think it may be a restriction of the control itself, because we're using underlying controls. But no, at this point, you have to specify the width and height.
Presumably the width could be 100%, so you could fill that way, right?
Yeah, and actually there is. Let's try that. See what happens here.
And the height,
height. I think there's like VH or yeah. So yeah, it's populating the full width is right here.
Yeah.
So yeah, you might have to do a little playing to get the sizing just right. So.
So then another question is, let's say your app, for whatever reason, has like 10 lists, and each of them might refer to PDF files. Would you have a separate component for each of those lists, or would you do one that each of the lists could call?
Well, really, it just depends on how many do you need to view at the same time. If you're only seeing one, I would point them all to one viewer. Yeah, keep your app smaller. But if you want to be able to have like 2 or 3 open at one time, you could actually have multiple PDF viewers in there. And what's nice is this PDF viewer, I have it visible, but this could be like a panel navigator where I had like 4 or 5 PDF viewers and I load them up and then the person could cycle through them really quick. I mean, you can use those kind of tricks there. Most of the time I've noticed that it's like, I just want to see that one thing. And so it's a single PDF viewer is sufficient for those kind of work.
Fantastic. So I'm going through and seeing if there are any other questions. There is just one other. And that is, so the question is there a way to use this with an Alpha report? So let's say you created a report using Alpha Anywhere, maybe using a layout table report, and it created a PDF file as its output. Could you then use this component then to view that? Or
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. And the nice thing is you get that formatting, that powerful formatting that comes with the report editor.
Yeah.
The only thing you need to do is after it's been, when you generate the report in PDF, you're going to store it somewhere. Right. Most often it's somewhere within your application, or it could be in another location that is referenceable by a.
So in the case of a cloud app, maybe S3 would probably be the likely place to
I gotta tell you, that's your way to go, and the cool thing about it is you can generate the report locally within the app and then upload it to S3. In fact, which is kind of cool, I was just reading the release notes and I haven't played with this yet. By the way, this is is the new PDF capabilities are in there. But there's a new they just added real quick, bear with me. That's cool in XBasics. No, that's static. They've sped up uploading files to S3. So before you had, let's see. Let's go, where is that? I just saw that. Here it is. So there's this way, when you're working with S3, you use what's called A5 storage. It's kind of like a generic library. And in there, you can do things like store files, you can go get a file from S3, et cetera, like there. But they have a new one called copy files, which is really cool. You can just provide it a single file name or a list of file names, and it will take all of that and in a single transaction, move it up to your S3 instance. And it speeds it up enormously. Instead of like, let's say you had 20 files, you would call copy, copy, copy. Now you can just say copy all those files at the same time, and it would just go boom. And it's really, we were using what's called the A5 save file. You get enormous speed increases because AWS just has some really cool tricks where if you give it a set, it's just gonna, it's gonna move them in very quickly. So you would create that PDF of that report, and then I agree, it's probably best to store it on Amazon S3 because then the speed is just enormous. Plus you relieve that sort of serving up work to AWS, not from your server. Also very beneficial when you're on like Alpha Cloud, because you really don't want to, you can't really store local files in Alpha Cloud because it's just not meant for that. It's not like you have a server, it's a service. So I tend to put all of my file work in S3. Once you're comfortable with that, you'll see there's a huge amount of advantages that come with that. But good point.
Very cool. Well, it seems you've explained everything very nicely because we don't have any more questions. Our questions bucket is empty. Can you believe that? Empty. Come on,
yes.
There's gotta be some questions. We'll give you guys a minute. We don't want to go home this early.
I know, yeah, especially after last week.
Exactly.
I know. Feel free to I'll screw something up. You want me to go for it? Well, I did that one, but my audio went off from it.
Okay, go like kind of. Can you show the demo in the mobile demonstrator? There you go. In other words, can you show what it looked like as a mobile app, just using the sort of the fake emulator that Alpha has built into it?
Wait a second, I'm sorry. I figured what caused the problem. That question again, if you don't mind, sir.
Sure. Can you show the demo that you just did, but in a mobile format? In other words, take that component and maybe click the display as a.
I thought they were going to say, could you redo that demo, but in Japanese? And then be like, well,
I did that last week.
Probably not.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm just clicking mobile here.
Yeah.
And that's going to render it in here.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see there. Now, reality is what I would do is the following. And let's go ahead and rebuild this as mobile. So I'm going to save this. And we're going to save this as PDF, viewer, dynamic, mobile _UX. And I actually added an extra, so I'll get rid of that before I distribute it. Okay, So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this. I'm going to put in a panel header. Actually, I'll put in a panel header here. Okay. I'm going to take this right here and I'm going to take it and I'm going to make it into a panel navigator. Okay. I'm going to delete the panel layout because I want to have it in a navigator, which means I'm only showing one panel card. Now, an interesting trick is when I click X, it's going to say, do I want to delete it? Yes, but it's going to ask me, do I want to just do the header and the footer or everything in between? The default says only this and that, which is what I want. I don't want to delete my content here. Okay, so now I have a navigator. So you'll notice first and foremost, when I launch it, I now just see my list control. I don't see my other. So what I want to do is when I click on this list PDF, I actually want to show that PDF or show that. So I want to show this panel card here. So let's remove this here. And I'm going to do two things to clean things up. First, I'm going to go here and I'm going to go rename this to PC list, which by the way, if you're doing, you should always name your panel cards because then you'll see in a moment, it makes your life easier. So PDF viewer. Okay, so remember when I click on list PDF, I'm setting this PDF, but the problem is when I do that, it's going to happen, but I'm not going to see my PDF viewer. So what I want to do is I want to modify so that when I click on this list, I not only update that, but I also show this panel card. Now remember what I said is that if I go into my list events, this is where it gets triggered. So I could go in here and start putting in more JavaScript. But again, let's say I'm using it somewhere else. So that's why I like to centralize my JavaScript, because now I can say, oh, I already have a command that does that. I'll just add that. I'll go to my JavaScript actions. I'll go in here and I'm going to add this. I'm going to say dialog.object.panel set active. And I'll right click on there and say I want the PDF viewer. So now I've updated this so all my code's in one place. By the way, this is pure JavaScript, but you can kind of create, you can use Action JavaScript and mix this with that, but that's an aside. Okay, so now all I have to do is now that I've done that, remember this Action JavaScript is already wired into my list, so I don't have to go adjust that, it's already done. So now I can go in here, click on there, there you go. So it's showing my PDF viewer. Now I do have an issue. Well, how do I get back to my, now I can use a swipe gesture, that may be fine, but I'm gonna give them something a little bit more. So I'm gonna go into my panel header here, and I'm gonna put in a button. Actually, let's just do, yeah, button. And I'm gonna call that list. And what I wanna do with that button to make it look a little nicer, I'm gonna put a image followed by text, go into my image name, and I'm just going to find a nice little SVG image because they're lightweight. Let's use that one. There you go. Okay. There we go. So I have a button here that when shown will do some Action JavaScript. Now remember, I could go ahead and generate it right here, but I like to do things centrally. So I'm going to go here and I'll say nav to list. You can come up with a naming convention. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here and I'm going to say panel, set active panel to be PC list. Now notice why I named them, so it's not just generic names. So that's why you should always name your PC, your panel cards so you know what they are. Makes it easier to manage that. So now I have this new Action JavaScript. I can go in here to my button. I can do one of two things. I can go to text mode and say insert code and nav to list. That's option one. Option two, if I want to stay in Action JavaScript, I can go in here and I can say run action, and then I can select nav to list and click OK. I'll say nav to list. So this is more of a pure Action JavaScript. I'm not embedding JavaScript, and all this is doing is running that little JavaScript behind the screen. So let's go ahead and see what this looks like. Oh, by the way, this button right here, I'm going to go ahead and make that 100%. So it's the full top. And you can work with styling and make it look good there. So now in my app, I see this. I go there, go back. And you can see as I do each one of them, it's refreshing and I'm seeing those. And it's doing a combination of loading the PDF and it's also navigating, and then I'm using a button to say navigate back, and now I have my mobile PDF viewer, which again is super powerful to do that with. As you see, I literally had to write 3 lines, really only 2 lines of codes I had to actually write, which was that get the value and load it up. Everything else can be done through Action JavaScript, through the built-in controls, the essence of low code. Super low code. Let's call that almost no code.
Almost no code. I like that.
Almost literally 2 line. We can go 2 code or 2 line code. Maybe that's the other one.
2 bytes.
Great question. Thank you very much. And again, if you want these, we'll go ahead and I'll bundle it up into a workspace and send it out to everybody.
All right, next question. This has to do, oh, and by the way, the questions have just pour in. That's what happened.
I know, the dam was broken.
Feast or famine, I think they call it. Okay, so I have a list box with a detail view. And so the detail view they're using to edit records.
Right.
But they want to know who changed the record. Maybe it's a session variable with the name of the person in it. And also when it was changed. So they want that to happen automatically when they make that update. How would you go about doing that?
Okay. Yep. Let me do this. The new. I just need to add a connection string, so I'm going to go ahead and create a new UI. And we'll go ahead and add a list control on here. See, I'm so used to going and pulling stuff out. It's crazy. List customers. So we're going to get that from, actually, I'm going through a little too quick. So I've got my UX. I'm going to add my list control. Okay, I'll call this list of customers. Now, instead of going through step by step, I'm going to use the quick setup genie down here. First, I'm going to tell it where I'm getting my data from. So go a demo Northwind. And then I'm going to go to table name and select customers. Field list, let's just add a few right here. Now, let's assume for our purposes here, region is what we want to update, okay? And that can be either username or, the date and time, etc. So that is going to be our magic there. Now I want a detail view and I want disconnected in case I need to go offline with this here. Okay. So I'm going to make this pretty by going to save this. I'll go list default value _ UX. Okay. So now we're going to go to working preview and just show you how this operates. So everything's kind of wired up and ready to go for me. I don't have to do any other coding or anything like that. So I've got alpha key there. You'll notice when I click on it, it updates it down here. And if I change something region, I'll go ahead and change that to 123, save it, and that information is in there. So if I go back up to a route, if I'm going too fast, let me know. You can see there, if I go back to Bergs, I think that's where I set, notice 1, 2, 3. So all that's done. Now, the issue is, in this case with region, let me erase this. What I want to do is when someone edits this record, I want to update this behind the scenes automatically. So there are a couple different ways to handle it, but it's a little different. Normally, you would put in like a default value here, but that's for new records. And in fact, a list control can set up for new records here. So let's go ahead and list of customers here. And let's look into a little bit about this. So we'll go to our fields and I'll go to region. So a couple of things that can happen right here is there's a couple ways you can handle this. First is that you'll notice in here that we have default values. So if you want for a new record to have a specific value in there, the current user, the date, time, or something like that, you can go into default and then put in, like you can say return, XYZ, and what will happen is this value, and you can use JavaScript, and there's some little examples in here, that will allow you to, then when a new record is created, it will default it to that value there. But if you want to edit it, let's see, yes, let's change there. So, so the other option, and it depends on how you want to do it from here, is what a very simple option is this, is that when you go to save the record here, you'll notice in here that Alpha has already created a a little piece of information here. This is basically getting a pointer there saying go ahead and then update it. So this is telling it to save the record. Well, in here you can put in a little command. You can say dialog.object.region set value, and then I'll select the control name region, and then you can set comma XYZ. So, and I could have calculated the current date time. I could have looked at another field or things like that and do it from there. And what this will do is it will set the value of that region, and then it will go ahead and save that value in there. That's like quick and dirty. That's simple. May not fit all your needs, but it's pretty straightforward. You just alter your save JavaScript to do that from there. Now, another option, which is a little bit more sophisticated, is in the list of customers in the field properties. Actually, it's in the detail view. There are a whole bunch of different server-side events. So one in particular, and so this is very important. What I just showed you worked on the client. What happens is server-side event is what happens on the server. And so in here, you can trap and do things before the record is saved by the system. So the cool thing about the list control is that it takes care of calling the server, giving it the data, and then telling it to save. But you could use something like the onSynchronize event. And let's go ahead and just show you a little bit. I won't be able to fully flesh it out, but I'm going to call this onSync. I'm going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. Okay. So what happens is you'll notice we have onSync, after synchronized record. So this is, and it tells you right now here, this is the function that will be called on the server when the person synchronizes the data. You want a complete control, this is where you can do this. This is what happens after the sync is done. So after sync, you may want to update a log table or do something like that. Now, I'm going to tell you up front, there may be an issue here is that if someone's entering 5 or 6 records over like a day, and then you sync and you want to timestamp those, they're all going to be timestamped when the time of the synchronization. So you're probably going to want to look at doing that update using client side so it happens immediately when you update that value there. But if you're not worried about it, you just want to update the data before it goes into the database, like with the username, you can use the onSync here. Now that I've got that, what's going to happen is when this is synchronized, it's going to run this function. And in here, you're given all the information to basically modify and update and do the data from there. So it gives you all of that data. See list data here, and you can do alter, you can review them, you can do all these other things there. We don't have enough time to dive into how this works. It's a little more extensive, but there is documentation on this functionality up on the alpha there. But again, the difference is this is going to occur when all records are synced or whenever the person synchronizes it. Now, if you're doing automatic sync, you're not offline, then this will trigger every time you do a sync from that standpoint there. I want to explore one other little thing in here is that we go into here. Let's go into this here. Let's go to the detail view. I'm thinking kind of ends. So this is also where you could put in some JavaScript to trap and change that information. So instead of putting it in the save button, you can actually go into the client side and you can look for, let's see, can update list. Yep, so like for instance, in the can update list, this fires when the user tries to update the list with edits that have been made. In here, you could do some alterations, but again, this will be client side because again, we're anticipating you might using offline. So that's in general. I mean, the quick and dirty way to do it is with save, but you also have the ability to do it during the sync process. Where is that? It's over here. I'm sorry, it's over here. Or you can do it with client side events, a couple different aspects here. And again, you got to be careful if you're updating, you'll notice update which fields, dirty fields only. You may want to have to set this to all fields so you make sure that any, of your edits are getting trapped. You'll have to experiment with that a little bit more. I hope that gives you some pointers on where to go on that. I tend to not use the onSync. I do use the after synchronize because what I'll do is after the thing is synchronized, I might send out a pusher notification, or I might update a log file or do something else that needs to be processing that data. Let's say I'm doing data collection, and when that data is up on the server, I need to run some server event to then like munch that data to put it somewhere else. That's something that's very handy within this area, is to be able to say, hey, after you synchronize everything successfully, go ahead and trigger this server side process to do something from there. So that's kind of hopefully gives you a little pointer of where to go at, how to make modifications. You know, that just remember you're going to maybe be offline, so you got to be a little careful how about those goes from there. And that, you know, and remember there's a difference between the default value, which again you'll set on the field here. Like if I'm creating a new record, then I would set that default value here. But if you're like updating a record, then you'll want to do that either through when you click save, do those adjustments there, or go into the list of customers, go to the detail view, and go to the client side events and find the proper event and put in your adjustments there. And then that will then the list will go ahead and do the rest of the work for you. I hope that's helpful.
That is terrific. Thank you, Dan. Next up, just a question someone had here, and that is, can PDFs be manipulated? Like, could you add pages, maybe concatenate PDFs and stuff together?
Yes, Alpha has actually a very wide range of PDF manipulation functionality. And manipulate is such a harmful word, but
Manipulation, yes.
Yeah, but there are print and PDF functions, and so you can encrypt them, you can combine them, you can do all this. So these are server side things. So after you generate that report, you may say, okay, combine 3 PDFs together, or you may want to put a cover page on them and turn them into a single PDF. The cool thing is that all of these are built into Alpha server, so those things will just run and work. So you can do all that on the server side, and the server will do that. And then you can maybe serve it up at, store it as a single file, store that file name into the database, or send it back to the user interface, and you're golden. So check that out. I'll go ahead and grab this.
If you grab that share link, superb.
There you go.
Just a quick reminder, if everyone sees what Dion is doing, he's doing it right. The share link, the one that you should be copying if you decide to bookmark something, is in fact that one. And
right
the reason
here
is because that's going to be the permalink. That one will always work. Whereas if we restructure our documentation, which we do from time to time, the URL up at the top can't be counted on. So use that link. That's what it's for.
Yeah, Sarah beat that into me. She's like, no, wrong URL. Do it again.
To all of us, yeah.
There's a lot of rulers and knuckles got hurt.
That is great. All right, so yeah, great. If you could paste that in, that'd be super. Now here's another question, one I haven't set up, but I'd want to, and it has to do with two-factor authentication. I don't know how much you've played around with this. Someone has written in saying that I see that there's an event in the UX under the login section properties called the two-factor login event. However, in testing, they tested it didn't seem to trigger. It didn't seem to work as they expected it. I'm just wondering if you had an example, and if not, perhaps we could do an example in an upcoming webinar.
Yeah, we definitely can. I mean,
I'd love
TFA
to do the whole
becoming
2FA altogether. Yeah.
Yeah, almost every week I have a new, like, especially financial sites and stuff like that. I think they're being required by law to implement two-factor as part of their security policy, insurance policies, and it's just good, practice. Like GitHub.
Yeah.
The GitHub, I think, is going to force TFA pretty soon because it's just this fear of losing your code. I haven't done it. We'll set it up for a follow-up there. The trickiest part with two-factor is you have to go through and do a bunch of setup work, specifically with Google and stuff, to make it all work, how it's implemented there. And so there's those setup pieces you have to make sure they're all working. But once they're working, then it'll just. But yeah, we'll put that on our list for future demonstrations because again, more and more people are requiring it.
And if anyone is interested, including the person who just asked the question, if you want to just send that question to guides, GUIDES,
we'll make sure we record it.
That'd be great, because I'd like to pass that around with a couple of people to say, hey, what's the best or the easiest way to set this up without being hassled?
And FYI, Sarah put in chat that restructuring is coming this year. So
all right,
winter is coming. Be prepared. Winter is coming.
Oh my gosh.
So, yeah, no, there's a lot of cleanup work we're doing.
Let's see. Someone asked, can you click on an email address and use that to send an email? And would that work in a grid or a UX or a list control?
Yeah. So first and foremost, if you put in, there are in the industry, there's like the mail to like in a URL.
And that's super easy to implement.
Yeah.
Too.
So you can use even, oh yeah, see, it's actually trying to open up my mail to.
Yep.
Actually, it's trying to do that HTML.
So if you built a page in Alpha Anywhere, which had a mail to link in it.
Yeah, let's hopefully I don't go to a bad site or anything like that. But you can actually embed in the link mail to colon, and then it will say, oh, that's a mail to, do you want me to open up your default mail system to do that mailing there?
Right.
And now important, that's different from inside of our documentation. Let's see, oh, here we are. Alpha has an enormous amount of mail functionality, so you can connect to Spark Post, Mail, Mandrill, SMTP, etc. So within there, you can put a link to say mail to colon and then the address, and then it will potentially open up the local mail program and then use that to send the information out. So that's what I would experiment with for. But if you want the server to send out, then there's a number of different server functions that will allow you with the proper credentials to use back-end mail systems to send mail out.
Terrific. Do you want to put the link in for that one as well? I guess you have to click on one before you get there, though.
I think it's
you have to first click sending and receiving is probably the.
Yeah, there you go. Yep. Let's go ahead and do that. Copy there and Roger.
Right. What else we got here? PDF. And finally, last but not least, we've got a FormView question, and it is: if I want to open a UX component in a panel card, do I need to have the FormView and editor sets in that child UX, or can I use the ones that are in the parent controls?
Well, if it's embedded, going to be tough. You're going to have to do a lot of like coordination between the parent UX and the child UX in terms of passing database. So I don't know if that would even work.
It would be easier, if not,
yes,
and certainly probably the most possible way so do include the form view and the editor set in that child UX. Okay.
Yeah, because it literally recreates that UX within the top level DOM, but it's a different entity. And so you can pass information back and forth through JavaScript, but you really can't, I don't know if you can directly, I think you can reference controls, but it's going to be a lot of JavaScript to get that to work properly. And even then, I can't guarantee it's going to be super solid. So you kind of want to keep things at a, if you're doing that level of sophistication, keep it on a single UX, because it'll, with panel cards, you can show and hide. So you don't use an embedded object, you actually just put the controls there. It may make your top level larger, but at least it'll be stable and it'll be easy to program and debug and do other things along those lines.
That makes a lot of sense. So the last question that I have here is deals with, could you set up a list, for example, or a grid that after you filtered it, gave you a list of email names, and then could you push a button and send the same maybe pre-canned email to all the people on the list?
Yes, absolutely. And again, what I would be using is something like send Spark Post, and so basically there's a really good example in here, but you basically say, okay, here's my send to, my reply to, etc. And so you can do like send to BCC. This could be just a comma delimited list of email addresses, and then it's going to send the same content to all of those people on that list. Again, you got to depend on, it's just like email. Either if you do the send to, then everybody's going to see it. If it's send to BCC, then each person will look like they're only getting one, that email kind of scenario.
Right.
But you can,
and conceivably, you could also, if you wanted to, do a loop and have it literally send out 10 or 15 things individually.
Exactly. Yep.
Cool.
Very much so.
Awesome. Well, we have come to the end of our time and nothing has seriously gone wrong. I didn't say nothing.
Thank God.
Dan, thank you very much for presenting
Thank
today.
you.
Thank you, Sarah, for showing up and answering those questions in the background. And thanks everyone here for attending, especially those of you who asked questions and helped keep the conversation lively. So if you do have further questions, you can go ahead and send them to guides, GUIDES @alphasoftware.com. And it's monitored by a team of people here, and we are happy to get back to you. We hope to see you at our next Wednesday webinar. Take care and stay well. Bye-bye.